Operator Syndrome, episode 36, up to 36 now. We're going to take some more listener questions. And we've got a good number of these. So if you've submitted some and you don't hear them, or if you hand delivered them to me in a certain case, then then we're going to get to that. But we'll do what we can. So we're just going to take some just general listener questions and we'll answer them. Do the best we can. So the first one is, what's a day in the life look like for a SEAL and or Ranger platoon? And so maybe we break it up. So what's it like being back at home station? What does your average day look like as a SEAL?
Yeah, okay.
Um,
And by the way, just thank you for the questions. I just want to, they're good, and you all give us encouraging comments. So that makes us feel good. And keep them coming. Operator Syndrome Podcast at gmail.com. So send those our way and we will address them in turn. Yeah, I saw this question and it's a good one. A gentleman kind of maybe kind of wondering to feel out the space of, if I remember correctly, this is a gentleman in the 82nd Airborne. Um,
I think
82nd
that's right.
Airborne. Anyway, yeah. So SEAL versus, or not versus, but a SEAL life versus a Ranger life. Okay. Well, once you make it through training, and that's a long process. It's Navy boot camp, and then off to buds. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, off to buds, and then they have pre-buds training, which is I don't know how long it is now, and then buds, and then another year of ATT or STT. They change them all the time, but it's another high level tactical training that before you ever get your trident and become a fully qualified SEAL and go to a platoon, which is where you start working. So the basic unit for a SEAL is the platoon level. You have multiple SEAL teams on the West Coast, teams on the East Coast, and I'm talking about a regular SEAL team now. I'm not talking about the National Asset Unit or the Tier 1 unit that is Navy side. So I'm talking about a regular SEAL team. Um, it's on the platoon level that you operate and that you train most of the time. Like until you get to a platoon, that's a little different. But once you get to a platoon, you train together as a platoon. A platoon is divided into two squads, two 8-man squads. At least that's what it was in my day. And those squads work sometimes together, sometimes separately, depends on the operation and what it calls for. Um, and I could say for starters, for SEAL in a platoon doing the normal deed, it is training almost every day. Uh, if you're in the San Diego area, if you're in the West Coast, if you're in Virginia Beach area on the East Coast, if you're training within the area, so maybe you're at the shooting range, maybe you're doing an ocean swim there at Virginia Beach or there in Coronado, then most of the time on a training cycle, you've got the weekends off. Usually, well, it just depends, but usually you're home maybe by 5, 6, if you're lucky. Fridays, we usually try to take the day off a little early. If everybody's just, we just have a normal going home for the weekend kind of thing. Now that doesn't, there, you might have to stand watch. You might have to do this or that. So it's not always a given. But that's when you're in the area training. So PT, swims, you might be doing a dive. Like we we don't always have to go to a special school to do a dive. We can do it right there in the San Diego Bay. And we're always just training for proficiency, so that if we're called on to do a combat swim or ship attack, we just put on the gear and do it like we've done a million times. We don't have to rethink everything. And so that's why so much training and the cycling in, because and I'll say this for the SEALs, and this is probably one of the differences between SEALs and Rangers on that level. I think it's safe to say we probably do a wider variety of direct action types of strikes. I've never heard of a Ranger platoon getting on a dragger rig and doing a ship attack. In other words,
That's top secret. We can't
yeah,
talk about
yeah,
that. That's
yeah,
top
right.
level 14 classified.
Yeah, we might do a yeah, like what we might do an insertion jumping out of a C-130 with rubber boats that are on these big cargo chutes at night, and we'll just the boats will go rolling out of the plane, and the things will inflate. You'll have engines and weapons and explosives and whatever the mission calls for in the boat. And that's called a rubber duck that we call it. And then we jump out with parachutes. We fly down, try to get as close to the thing as we can, and de-rig it, rig it up, put the engine on, all this stuff, and take off and go do our mission. That's probably pretty specific to the SEALs. I don't think there's a whole lot. I mean, maybe special forces could do it or have done it
Yeah,
on a
like dive. I think
yeah,
dive teams probably do that, and then
yeah,
seems like reconnaissance marines.
yeah. That's
I've
right.
seen sizzle reels of them doing something similar. But
Yeah,
yeah, rangers we don't dive. Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's true. And recon does have people who are dive qualified. It's just that in force recon and in special forces, it's not everybody is dive qualified.
yeah, they just specific. Well, yeah, probably. Yeah, I defer to you. I know in a special forces company, I believe
Mhm.
that they just have one dive ODA. So one ODA will be designated a dive team, and you've got to I guess you gotta. I guess they don't go out. I guess SF dudes don't go out of their way to join the dive team. They're
Right.
just as afraid of water as everyone else. So like, so
Yeah.
it's a special individuals volunteer for that team.
I talked to a lot of special forces guys when I was at two different pretty long schools out at Fort Bragg, and we talked a lot about diving, and it was not everybody's cup of tea. In fact, most guys are like, "You can have it." They called the dragger the death rig. Some of them. It is a
Well,
very. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, it can get you into some trouble. It's
yeah,
tricky.
we're not supposed to be under there that long,
Yeah,
Steve.
yeah, right.
It's not supposed to. And then I think they also have free fall teams. So I mean I
Yeah,
think that's very interesting that those capabilities in like the special forces, the Army Special Forces is spread across teams, whereas I know for SEALs now they try to like jam pack every capability into a single person in the teams, SEAL teams.
yeah. It's a lot, and maybe we're jacks of all trade, masters of none, but we do a lot of training. And so back to that, a you're going to be on the road a lot. Okay, so and I just say if you want to be home with your wife and kids every night, and you're really a family guy, you might want to consider it because you're just going to be on the road so much. It's really hard. It's hard enough to raise a family when you're home every night and have a great marriage and all that. But boy, when you're deployed constantly, and then and I'm talking about when you're in the stateside, you're going to Montana for mountain, you're going to Alaska for winter warfare, you're going to Panama for jungle, out at an island in the desert. Nobody's coming with you out there. You're not going home on the weekends. You're there for a month, let's say, doing CQB or something like that. So it's a lot of being on the road. And then after being on the road for like a year and a half workup, which we call it, then you're going to deploy for 6 months somewhere in the world, and you're going to be downrange for 6 months. So just keep that in mind because it's just training, training, training until combat arises, and then you're in combat. You're going to combat, and it's almost guaranteed for Rangers and SEALs. We're our top direct action. Those are I would say, if you said who are the top two direct action special operations units, would be Rangers and SEALs. Now there's others. There's plenty of others, but you're headed to the guns. Let's put it that way. Um, then I'd also say along that line, uh, and this is probably somewhat different from the life of a ranger. And I'll after this I'll just kick it back to Patrick, and because we don't have so much time here. You're gonna you better prepare yourself if should you choose to go that direction for a lot of time in cold water. I mean, we just do it. We call it cold, wet, and miserable. And man, you if you don't like cold water, I would do something else. I don't like cold water either, but I guess I could tolerate it. I liked the job enough to where I could tolerate it enough to where it was still worth it for me. But it was always miserable and nobody ever liked it. And nowadays it's funny because I have friends that do the polar bear plunge and in the winter time and they get naked and jump in the cold water and they're like, "Oh, that was cool." I'm like, "Good for you." I'm not getting paid to do that anymore. And you want to talk about the Bahamas or Bora Bora? Okay. Warm water, I love it. And I love to snorkel, I love to scuba dive. Only where it's warm. I do not like the cold. So that to say, lot of cold, wet, and miserable days and nights in the SEAL teams.
Yeah, it takes me a good 10 minutes to ease myself into any ocean or pool, hotel pool.
Yeah.
So that tells you where I am on that. I'll even go real granular here for a day in the life back stateside. I'll I'll choose like a Wednesday on some random. So same thing, we work off of a training calendar. So you have a good idea of what you need to prep for during your training. We call it training cycle. SEALs call it a workup, but you have a good idea of what those things are, and so you can plan accordingly. So if let's say if I pick a random Wednesday before some major event, and the major event might be, individual skills or platoon, squad movement, squad live fires, platoon live fires, airfield seizure, all that kind of stuff. So just choose some random day. You come in early. It's still the army for us, so we still wake up early, and we get in a formation. We get in our pretty little lines and we stand there and they report in and all accounted for. And then we do a squad. Okay. During my time, also, let me do the disclaimer. In
Yeah.
my time, you do squad PT. Back then in the aughts, um, we still were pretty we were in a transition period in our physical fitness. Like the main you basically did two things for PT, and it depended on what your squad leader was good at. So if your squad leader was a runner, you probably just ran all
Yeah.
PT. And you just run around where we were Fort Benning. Your squad leader liked to lift, you'd be lifting.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. So it was squad level PT most of the time. You run off, you do that for like an hour. And I can't remember what time we'd show up. It was like '06. Does that sound right? Does that sound military enough? So like '06, you work out for an hour. '07, then you change, you shower, and then you'd go eat. And we'd all eat as a squad. So every morning we'd go, um, and we'd eat at the dining facility m- managed by Rangers. So Rangers, were the cooks there. You'd go and eat pretty well, and then you'd come back. You'd come back and start your day. Like eight. I don't know, 9 o'clock. You're starting the work day. And so if this was leading up to a training event, you've got equipment you need to look into to make sure it's serviceable. You got to pack things up. If you're in the army, you definitely know about layouts. Rangers still do layouts just like everybody else. Um, so you're laying out equipment, you're doing accountability, sensitive items, inventories. We got to do those too. In fact, it probably sucks more because we got cooler stuff than some other units, so we've got more sensitive items that need to be accounted for.
Yeah.
Um, and then throughout the day, you might do, we always call it like hip pocket training, right? It's like, because that's really how Rangers, a lot of Rangering is on the job training. It's OJT. So it's a team leader grabbing their new guys when you don't have anything to do right there in that moment and to go show them how, hey, this is how we clear a room. This is how we breach. This is how we do it. And you just doing that around the company area. So you might set up glass houses, and I don't think any of this is unique to just the Rangers. I think many conventional Army units, especially in our time when everyone was deploying and everyone knew had that lingering over them, or upcoming combat over them. I think everyone was doing that, so nothing really that unique. Um, and then you do your work day, and you go eat lunch. Usually eat lunch together. I mean, doing everything together was like a big thing. I'm aware of some parts of the army where it's almost like a 9 to 5. You check in, you check out, you go to lunch on your own, you do this on your own. Like you couldn't do that Like you couldn't just be like, "Oh, I need some me time." It's like, no, you're part of the squad. you're you're eating with us. You're doing this with us, unless there is something special going on, like you had an appointment or something. And then we'd probably leave. Back then it felt like it was late. Like we'd leave like 5, 6 o'clock at night. And back
Yeah,
then, and there are times where you've got nothing to do. You're waiting for the word, right? You're just sort of sitting around. You're goofing off, and there's a little bit of that too. But 5, 6, and then you get, and we'll talk about it later. But you get out into the real world, and it's like, well, that's a work day, dude. So like,
yeah,
like real people work way later than that all the time. But
yeah,
that's a normal day, a low key day. But in terms of like, you get into the training cycle and you deserve that time off, sort of, you'd call it. You
yeah,
may feel like there's not a lot laid on for the day and it's kind of up to you to manage. And that's
right,
good because, you know, 3 weeks later, you're doing like a 24-hour evolution where you're taking over an airfield, and you're not getting any sleep and you're
right,
awake, or like you said, you're traveling. We travel as well. We travel for some of our bigger things, live fires and there were some, and especially during that time, we wouldn't try to go too far because I mean there's just so much training and compacted in a short time. So similar in that way, but yeah, we would focus on sort of just like the bread and butter of what rangers do. We didn't have to worry about rigging boats and dive equipment and all that kind of stuff. What about PT for SEALs? Did
yeah,
you all do that
yeah,
individually, or you guys during your time? Would you all do that individually, or you all as a squad or a platoon or what?
yeah. Both actually. That's another thing that we PT a lot, a
Mhm,
whole lot. I would say probably up there with anybody else I could imagine as far as time PT. And we
mhm,
usually spend a couple hours like right after muster, which is I forgot what it was, 0700 something like that.
mhm,
We usually didn't eat. We would PT before we ate, which I think a lot of people probably do because you just the kind of PT we were doing, you didn't want a bunch of big heavy stomach or
yeah,
food. You might
yeah,
have a
yep,
power bar or a Gatorade or an energy drink or something and head out. We would PT as a platoon, almost it depended on where we were, but if we were in the team in the Coronado area, team 5 where I was, it would be either, and it might be all of the above. We did a lot of running on the beach, fast running on the beach, swimming. We would do a lot of times we would do run swims. We would a lot of times either do a run or a swim. On Fridays, a lot of times we would do like run swim obstacle course. And our obstacle course is the same one that the Buds guys run, and it is tough. It's a butt kicker. So we go on, say, 4 to 6 mile run, do a mile ocean swim out and back, and then run the obstacle course, and then cool down jog for a couple miles or a mile. That would be typical on a regular PT day. Then after, like Patrick was saying, it's kind of the same. If things are just kind of we're just field daying our equipment, getting ready for a dive, looking over all of our gear, we could kind of had some time to kind of do what we wanted. I sometimes would go, like say we're doing a big training operation the next day in the area. So we're prepping. If all my checklist was done and I got my gears good to go, then I had time off. I may go lift weights. We did a lot of lifting weights. Now a lot more. It's all changed. It's CrossFit. There wasn't no such thing as that back then. A lot of guys are doing CrossFit. I would go to train in jujitsu. Um, and then I might go to the airloft and pack parachutes or talk to the guys there and just talk area operations and stuff like that. So, but when we hit the road on a combat swimmer course, we went up to say Bangor, Washington, to the Navy base up there. Now we're talking, we're not getting off at 5 or 6 at night. We're diving most of the night and getting in late, fielding our gear, cleaning it up. And then the sun's coming up sometimes when we're hitting the rack and getting up early to get prepped for another dive. So it's a lot of work. And I always tell guys, if you don't like to work and work hard, I mean, sometimes you get to play hard, but when you're really in a cyclic platoon training, man, it's working and PTing training and PTing a lot all the time. So yeah, when you do get time off on the weekends, it's just eat a pizza, and sit back and watch a movie because you're exhausted
It's
pretty
so
much constantly.
That's and I've heard that from so many people. And I met a guy who was in First Ranger Battalion after I got out. We were both working at the same consulting firm, and he once even said, I was like, "So what do you do? Like, what are you doing like in your free time?" He's like, guys like us, we don't do anything."
Yeah,
And it's absolutely true. It almost becomes like a habit. Like you get guys on Instagram or whatever that are living their best lives. They still jump and dive and do whatever. But most of us
yeah,
carry on that same sort of mentality before, where it was like the weekends you're recovering from work, and so you don't do anything. You're
yeah,
just a lazy piece of crap just sitting there. Hopefully you work out, hopefully you spend time with your family, but you default to it's almost like your body defaults to like this is my rest time.
yeah,
I'm locked into resting. Like I
yeah,
don't want to go apple picking. I don't want to I don't
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't want to do this. Like this is my time because I'm prepping for the week coming up. And I still fight that even now, however many years later.
yeah,
But yeah, we would towards the end of the time we would do the same thing. Like if there's nothing going on, when I was first there, it wasn't common for you to work out twice. It was
mhm,
almost like there's your workout time, you do it with the squad. By the time I was leaving, we were like easing up on that, and also we were getting a lot more resources for
mhm.
like physical and physiology. We were getting all kinds of enablers around and better gym equipment, and all this funding came out of nowhere. And so by the end, it would be like you probably worked out twice a
No,
day.
yeah,
You work
easy.
out as a squad, and then usually it'd be like a team or maybe even individually. You work out in the afternoon, which was great, which I was happy to see.
Yeah.
Um,
When I was getting ready, just last comment, when I was getting ready for Dev Group, I was getting ready to go to Green Team, and my buddy who also had orders to Green Team, we were working out at least 3 times a day hard. I mean, platoon workouts or whatever in the morning for a couple hours, weights during our lunch break, and just grabbing some stuff, real healthy food, scarfing it. And then we were doing long swims and runs in the evening, and pull-ups and lots of calisthenics. So, but that wasn't, I did, that was 3 times a day, every day.
mhm.
Even on the weekends, maybe twice and on the weekends, but it was insane amount of PT. But
Yeah, if you were to look at a Ranger in like on like September 11th, 2001, if you were to look at what the average Ranger looked like, and then look at like the average Ranger probably like, let's say today, it's
mhm.
like you're looking at two very different types of
Yeah,
of people. No, nothing, no offense to the
right.
earlier guys, but it's like it definitely changed. The funding and the mentality changed to where like you look at these guys and they're freaking monsters.
Yeah. Same in
They're
the SEALs.
they're
Same in the SEALs.
monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Next question.
Good.
Uh, are the SEALs the youngest special operations unit that'll take in people? I guess the question
Yeah.
is kind of like, and their follow-ups are kind of around age. And I think Ranger or excuse me, so SEALs will take people off the street. In fact, you
Yeah.
almost primarily take folks off the street, right?
Yeah. I
And
went in at 18. Enlisted, we're talking
yeah,
about. Yeah.
enlisted, correct. So
Yeah.
enlisted, so you can be probably so as early as you can enlist, you can go to BUD/S. There's no
That's
age
right.
requirement. Same thing
You're gonna
for
you
go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry. Well, you're gonna be at least 20 by the time you're qualified.
Yeah.
But that's pretty young. I mean, I don't think it's in spec ops. When we talk about, now we can talk about the tier one units on both sides of the fence,
Mhm.
and then we can talk about special forces. I think in both of those cases, you're dealing with an older group as a whole because
Mhm.
you're having to do infantry training, specialty stuff. You now definitely with the tier one units, you're dealing with an older crop of guys that are super experienced, or at least very experienced and have done at least a couple of SEAL platoons in a regular team. So by then, I mean, you figure 3 years, if you're fast tracking 2 platoons in 3 years, that's fast tracking it. And on 2 years of training, now you're talking about at least mid 20s to late 20s, and so many times it's more platoons than that. So they're looking for experience, and there's only one way you get experience, and that's time.
That's
um
right.
yeah, so yeah, we're probably one of the youngest. I think the PJs may, I think they
PJs take them young. They'll
take them
take them
young.
off the
Yeah, but there again, it's a long pipeline. PJ pipeline's even longer than SEALs.
Yeah,
because they're going to be combat medics. They're going to be basically paramedics on top of diving, and that's another group that everybody's dive
that's true.
qualified,
That's true.
PJs. So they don't. Sometimes people don't think a lot about PJs. I'm telling you, those are some hard chargers, and that's a really elite group to make it through. So
I think I might have told this. I might have said that referenced this before, but my last deployment, I'd done 5 rotations by then in my initial contract. And I met a PJ who was co-located with us, but they were doing CSAR, but we weren't doing CSAR. But they were co-located with us, and I was talking to him, and he was a Kentucky Air Guard PJ, so that
uh-huh.
could have had a factor into it too. But we both joined the military at the same time, and I was on my last rotation, about to get out of the army, and that was his first deployment. So this was
Wow.
2009,
Yeah.
2009 going into 10, and that just shows, again, he was a guard guy, so maybe that played into it, but he seemed like he was trying to get on one as soon as possible, and they do, like, the PJs at that time did a lot of augmenting stuff, so it wasn't like, if you wanted to go, a PJ could hook up with an active duty, like, team going over, but that
Yeah.
just shows how long their training is, that I was wrapping up and he was just getting started. So,
Right.
um but yeah, I think, in terms of the ones that require experience at this point, so Army Special Forces traditionally required a more, um, well, no, they do, because 'cause they'll take people off the street, but you still have to be 21, I think, 20 or 21. But
Something like that.
you can't be 17 or 18 joining the Green Berets. You gotta, at least even off the street, you gotta be 20 or 21. And
Right.
then, traditionally, they had always preferred, folks with at least one contract doing something, anything. I met a guy in Ranger School who was a Green Beret in 18 Delta, and he was like a radar repairman in
Hmm.
Korea,
Hmm.
and then he became an 18 Delta, and I just think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Having people in an ODA with just with varied background like that, I think that's cool. And I believe that the Marine Special Operations component, the Marine Raiders, a little too close to Rangers, Raiders,
Yeah.
but the Raiders, I believe they require. I don't think they take anybody off the street, and I think they require one contract doing something before you can join them. So they're kinda like the
You're talking
Green
about MARSOC?
the MARSOC
Yeah,
guys,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I really don't know much about them. They really came on the scene after I was already out. I mean, I know basically they're part of SOCOM, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't know.
They're yeah, I don't know that much either. I was about to start guessing, but I don't wanna put out wrong information,
No,
so
but let's put it this way. You're not going from Paris Island boot camp to MARSOC.
correct,
Yeah,
right.
you're gonna do some sort of something. Not whether it's recon, company recon, force recon, something, but
Yeah, I think it sounds like the reconnaissance battalions will, take new guys, but I recently heard a podcast from, I can't remember the name, I apologize, but he was describing it, and it sounds like they have a lot of gates in
yeah.
training that do that. We sort of talked about this person's next question, which was sort
Yeah.
of the age progression, and I think you pretty much hit it.
Yeah.
For the units where you can come in fresh, by the time you've got like the bare minimum experience to try out for other things, you're probably in your mid 20s to late 20s. And then
Right.
for the tier 1 units, which, again, disclaimer, neither of us were in, but we're aware that,
Yeah.
your new guys are in those groups are mid mid-ish 20s, and
Yeah.
then some of those guys get pretty old. They hang
Right.
they hang around there for
Yeah.
a while. So there's a lot of good experience there.
A lot of
Uh,
experience. I think when I was there in another capacity at Dev Group, the junior most assaulter I ever saw was at least an E5. Um, and most were E6 and chiefs as
yeah.
actual what we call assaulters. So that's a lot of experience.
Yeah, from what I saw, anecdotal, but from what I saw, you weren't getting into certain units if you didn't have at least squad leader time.
Right.
Like, you weren't gonna be some, you know, you weren't gonna be like a saw gunner and then make your way in there. But that's just what I saw.
Yeah.
Um, sort of in that same vein, what issues or problems are magnified in young operators, as they phrase the question. What, so
Huh. Yeah.
what are problems associated with the young bucks?
Okay. Well, for seals, it's a combination of things. Immaturity. Um, you just a young knucklehead, and you're full of fire, a lot of ego. You haven't been punched in the gut enough yet, and all of this stuff works itself out if you hang with it, and you prove to be open to becoming a better operator. It's just going to take care of itself. um Kind of getting the big head, thinking you already know everything, thinking these old guys don't know what they're talking about, or you know you come in with so many like loaded things in your thinking that you have to kind of flush them out of your system. So I think it's just I mean, it's a very methodical. You'll grow. I mean, you'll either wash out or be kicked out if you're just that big a knucklehead, because nobody wants to work with that person, or put in stuffed off into some little department that you're not in a platoon. We had guys at teams that nobody wanted in a platoon, and they didn't do something worthy of being kicked out of the SEALs, but they were off working in the diving department, not operating, or working in ordnance. I mean, cataloging bullets and stuff like that. And that's fine. Maybe they lived a happy life, but not everybody, once they saw, wow, this is the life of an operator, they're like, I don't know if I made the right choice. And that happens quite a bit. So yeah, just it takes care of itself, but it's just young, immature, big ego, um, not paying attention, not not really being curious and open about what other guys are telling you, and just kind of getting bullheaded. So that would be basically all I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Immaturity and then inexperience, and those are two different things. I think you were describing immaturity very well. And listen, the Ranger Regiment is full of 17, 18, 19, 20-year olds. I remember getting there. And I remember getting there, and my platoon sergeant was like 20. He's probably like, yeah, he was like mid 20s. My platoon sergeant was
Yeah.
mid 20s, but I
Yeah.
thought he was ancient.
Right. Right.
I'm coming in, I'm 18, and I think a
Yeah.
25-year-old platoon sergeant is ancient. That just sort of tells you how skewed, at least in the Ranger Regiment, how skewed the age structure is. You've got your sergeant majors are in their 30s. You know, that's crazy. And they if your platoon sergeant was ancient, your your sergeant majors were like relics. They were like museum pieces.
Right.
And so, but the immaturity part is it's a problem because and in the Rangers, I don't know any unit that
Yeah.
is happy to kick people out as much as it's almost like we got something to prove, like we want that reputation, which I'm not
Mhm.
against. But when you're that young and you're very excited about the work that you're doing, um, and you like to go out and you like to be an 18, 19, 20-year old and go out and party and things, and the number of people that got kicked out for DUIs and for getting in trouble with the law, I mean, it's too many to count. Can't
Yeah.
even count how many. And it was almost like it wasn't a matter of if dudes were going to get in trouble on the weekends. It was how many.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
how many, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so it was so funny. It's like, guys dropping like over the years, guys dropping like flies. You're like, oh man, he got a DUI. That sucks. And then
Yeah.
you see him walking around and he's in regular army PT clothes. Because as soon
Yeah.
as you get in trouble, like they strip you of all the. They're like, wear your black beret. Um, like when you get in PTs, you got to wear the regular army. Everyone else wears like all black. Well, at the time, we were the only ones that wore black tops and bottoms, but so they wear like the gray tops and just the shaming
Yeah.
immediate. So that's just general immaturity, and then obviously, as Steve was extrapolating it to, that goes into your work too. It goes into thinking you know what you're doing. It goes into not being open to things. It goes into, and this is like a general problem, which is, you think maybe you're being innovative you've got suggestions. It's like, dude, we've seen this a million times.
Yeah, right.
That's been tried a million times and failed.
Yeah.
Um, and then from the inexperience, that's just even if you've got your head on straight, which I like to think I was someone who was more mature. I'm not going to say I was, but maybe more mature than definitely the ones who got kicked out.
Mhm.
But you just can't rush experience, and you can't rush wisdom,
Yeah.
and that's just something when you see folks talking about what they're going to do, or I'm going to go be a ranger, and then in a couple of years later I'm going to go do this and do that. They're forgetting the part where you have to learn how to do the job, and that takes time.
Yep.
And things like, hey, pay attention to these hills. There might be bad guys on those hills. It's daytime.
Mhm.
I learned that lesson the hard way. Well, would I have learned that lesson if I weren't in that position, or if I hadn't known someone who was in that position? So I would at least heard the stories and been like, okay, check. From now on, when it's daytime, look at the high ground. That seems like a common sense thing to do.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, that's experience. And as we're wrapping up here, um, we just got someone dropped some books they thought we should take a look at because we do that every once in a while. One was War by Sebastian Younger. Have you read that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Read that
good.
one? Yeah, I haven't read that one. And the other one was Black Hearts. I got the last name Frederick, and I think that one is about. I hadn't looked it up, but I think that one was about.
Yes.
That may have been some Army unit or Marine Corps unit that sort of went nuts. Maybe
Yeah.
we're doing bad things. So maybe we check that out because
Yeah.
that's stuff we comment on every once in a while.
And we may come back to this one. There was a 21-year-old woman who asked about how should a woman prepare for buds. We might not have time to really cover this all since I'm the buds department, I guess. How are women treated in buds? I do not know. This is way after my time. I uh, it says, do you have any advice for preparation for women? Not really, other than I would just say everything I've said in the past about for a male would apply for a female. Every ounce I've given out. Like I said, I do have a book. I'm not trying to plug my book, but I do have one called Surviving Buds. It's an Amazon ebook. Google my name and Surviving Buds. It's my mental game for making it through. Every suggestion I have, it's only like 99 cents or something, or $1.99.
Nice.
So, but that's what I would say for women preparing. Um, she said there were two females who both broke legs in buds, pre-buds, and rolled out. And she wants to go, and then another female got stress fractures. I don't know what to say. Just be as strong as you can. A lot of calcium. It's going to get you. It's a pounding. So anything you can do to strengthen, if there's supplemental ways. But I really wouldn't have, because I just don't know. I would really say prepare in a way. I would say a guy should prepare.
There you go. We'll catch you guys next time.
All
Bye.
right.